Good morning and welcome to the Mike Graham Show. It's the end of the week, so we're going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to look back on all the madness that's happened in Westminster. Is Rachel Reeves a liar? Obviously, yes.
Sorry. That headroom, it's just you're forward a bit, which is fine.
Sorry, do you want me back a bit?
No. Go where you were. I'll just adjust it.
I just quite like leaning
forward.
Yeah, no,
that looks better. There you go. Okay, we're still rolling.
Good morning and welcome to the Mike Graham Show. What a week it's been. We're going to look back on it because it's time for the big weekend. We're only a few days away, 10 days away or something from Christmas. It's, again, absolutely ridiculous out there. But we'll be telling you all about what were the big stories this week. Keir Starmer, still stuttering around, still not really knowing what he's doing, still clinging on to his job for dear life. Rachel Reeves, still telling lies about how she's stabilised the economy. We've got Mark Littlewood in to look back on all of that and to also look at the new possible French president who might be coming in, who might want to actually stop the boats coming to Britain, which would be quite something. I'll also be telling you about my rather unusual ride through the streets of London on a scooter one night when I'd had a few drinks, which wasn't the best idea I've ever had. And also, we'll be telling you about a woman who got sacked from her job because she kept turning up early. Absolutely extraordinary. This, of course, is the real home of common sense. Let's get it on. They say a week is a long time in politics. And if you... There we go.
I'm going to use that for an outtake.
Yeah. So, they say a week is a long time in politics, and if you're Rachel Reeves or Keir Starmer, you must think, blimey, a day seems like an awfully long time as well, because it just goes from bad to worse. They cling on to the wreckage of this government as it kind of slides ever further down into the gurgler. But Reeves didn't seem to have any clue when she was appearing before a committee this week, when she was asked about who leaked what, when did they leak it, why did they leak it. She's got an inquiry going on, though. And Starmer was called a caretaker prime minister by Cammy Badenoch. To look back on the week in politics, Mark Littlewood joins me. Mark, a very good morning.
Great to be with you again, Mike.
Good to see you. It does seem a very long time ago from Monday when Keir Starmer was doing his international statesman bit and inviting Volodymyr Zelensky back to Downing Street. I noticed this time that they took my advice because I'd always said, you know, the length of the hug is very important. And the last time he came, if you remember, Starmer kind of wouldn't let go of him. It all looks a bit homoerotic, and he was kind of holding him for dear life. But this time, the hug lasted about a second, and they kind of stood apart.
Much more business-like.
And then Macron turned up, and then Merz turned up from Germany. And I don't even know what happened. I don't think anything happened, really, did it?
I think nothing really happened. I mean, look, this is the truth, isn't it? I think all fair-minded people, if they could click their fingers and have Ukraine prevail in this war, would click their fingers and want Ukraine to prevail. But Europe has dodged its defence commitments for years. We've been basically living under the military welfare state provided by the Americans. So Donald Trump calls all the shots, and rightly so. I mean, you know, the UK and France are sort of bit players. Everybody else, well, you know, what's the European Union going to do? You know, issue a stiffly worded letter. That's about the maximum power that they've got. I mean, the war's got to come to an end, and it will obviously be some sort of compromise when it finally comes to an end. And you can't trust Putin, so you've got to nail his feet to the floor. But all of these European leaders parading around, including our own Prime Minister, I mean, they are broadly irrelevant to the overall peace deal. I mean, it's useful if they're seen to be supporting Zelensky in some way, I suppose, but it's basically performative rather than serious, all of it. And of course, Keir Starmer now seems to be addicted to attempting to get his mind off any domestic issue, the economy, immigration, or anything else, just by parading around as a sort of poser international statesman. So he will take every opportunity to hug any foreign leader he can possibly get his arms around, I would think, Mike. And we should treat it as a pretty, you know, relatively risible, fairly insignificant event, I would say.
That's absolutely true. I mean, again, sort of the budget continues to haunt the long sort of shadow of Rachel Reeves' second budget is still kind of casting its spell over the whole of the country. And when we saw just the other day a campaign run by a guy who runs a pub down in Dorset to ban all Labour MPs from all pubs, and they're going to have a sticker in the window just saying that Labour MPs are not welcome.
This is brilliant, isn't it? I mean, the sort of people who would usually be on the barred list in a pub, it's, you know, people who get continually involved in a fight or have snapped the snooker cue or, threw darts into the wall rather than at the darts board or used foul language, and Labour MPs.
Yes.
And it's spreading like wildfire, this, right? This guy set it up in his own pub, but then loads of other publicans are saying, oh, can you send me the kit and the sign and on the door? And I don't remember if it was this guy or another one, I think it was down in Dorset as well, in Bournemouth, who actually said, I voted for my local Labour MP. I quite like him personally, but he's still barred.
Yeah,
right. So they're going in pretty brutally.
Well, this was started by this guy Andy Lennox, who's got a pub down in Dorset, as I say, because he said what I think an awful lot of people would think is right. He said it comes to something, and you're in a bad place when the government's making more money out of a pint than you are.
Yeah.
As the owner of the pub.
Yeah. I know it's terrible what's happened. I think there's two really bad things that have happened, not just to the hospitality sector, Mike, but within the economy as a whole. That essentially the government are making things worse. But to really rub it in, they're gaslighting us, right? So Rachel Reeves will come out and say, oh, I've made the economy better for the hospitality sector. No, you haven't. You've made it extraordinarily harder. Minimum wage is going up. The business rates relief, which came in over COVID, is obviously being whittled away and phased out. This makes it damn near impossible to run a pub at a profit. And there's only so much that you can dial up your prices to, right? I mean, how far are we away, do you reckon, from the £10 pint? Not far.
I mean, I've seen it £9. I mean, I've paid £9 for a pint of Guinness in London.
Yeah. And I would think this will start to get common. But at this point, of course, if it gets much more expensive, people just won't go at all. You can't just keep dialing up the price. People will stop drinking or go to the supermarket and get a bunch of tinnies.
Many young people will tell you that young people now, quite a lot of them, don't drink very much or don't drink at all.
Yeah, it's horrific,
which is horrific.
I
don't know what they're doing with themselves.
Yeah, exactly. I thought the young was supposed to be the kind of slightly dangerous tearaways, but aren't the young now just trying to bore their parents to death rather than scare them to death?
They're not having sex with anyone.
They're not having sex.
They're not getting drunk.
But they don't do drugs anymore.
Not because they don't want to damage themselves, but because it's not fair trade.
Because they can't access any fair trade.
You might be feeding this horrible, Colombian drug cartel. But it's absolutely extraordinary. But this guy Andy Lennox says basically this is a big moment for the hospitality business because Sacha Lord and people like him in the nighttime economy business have talked about this a lot since Labour got in. And I think I've spoken to you about this before, that so many jobs have disappeared out of hospitality. And not only that, but a lot of businesses, and my son works in one of them, have cut down massively on the hours that they give to the people to work. The number of shifts that they get, because it's simply becoming impossible to make any money.
Yeah, and you notice that as a customer as well.
Yeah,
that there are fewer bar staff, so you could be waiting 10 or 15 minutes at the bar before you get served. So therefore, it becomes a less
very
pleasant,
annoying, by the way.
Very annoying. Therefore, it becomes a less pleasant experience. Therefore, you think, well, why don't I stay at home with a couple of cans of lager tomorrow night rather than go down the pub? So regulation and tax has put the hospitality sector in an extremely bleak place. And it is particularly sensitive to minimum wages going up. That doesn't matter so much if you're running a hedge fund in the city of London because nobody's on the minimum wage, or very few are. Maybe the cleaning lady is. But if you're in the hospitality sector, you've got quite typically reasonable amount of fairly casual labour, minimum wage. Sometimes it's students or whatever topping up, using their spare hours. And therefore, you are on very, very fine margins. And where Reeves and Starmer have turned the screw is likely to hurt the hospitality sector disproportionately. So I think we're losing, isn't it? Like a pub a day is closing.
Yeah.
It's going to be wipeout at some point.
Right. It is absolutely incredible. And, you don't really see a way out of it either because, with Rachel Reeves still kind of in denial. I mean, she appeared before this Treasury Select Committee and she still says things like, this is why I've stabilised the economy. And you kind of go, huh?
Yes, exactly.
Which bit of it have you stabilised exactly?
Yeah, I looked through her Treasury Select Committee evidence and it basically seemed to be that the only thing that she was trying to get across was that Keir Starmer was her accomplice and co-conspirator at the scene of the crime.
Yes.
So if she was going to go down for it, he had to go down for it with her. That was the key message that she got across. But that's where I go back to this gaslighting thing, Mike, that they sort of think that they can make things true just by saying them.
Right.
So one of her claims was breaking the British population into deciles, the bottom 10%, the next 10%, the next 10%, up to the richest 10%. And her claim was, all of them, apart from the richest 10%, are going to be better off. Well, this doesn't this doesn't bear even a second of
risible, isn't
scrutiny.
it?
Yeah, it doesn't bear a second of scrutiny.
Yeah.
And there's, as an economist who likes looking at all the statistics, here is the real issue. We still measure whether GDP, the gross domestic product of the country, I say all of our financial activity is going up, going down, or staying about the same. But a fairer way to measure it would be GDP per capita. So if GDP's gone up 1%, but the population's gone up 3%, you're actually getting less money, fewer pounds into each pocket. So in many ways, although if you look at the economy overall, you can't yet say we're in a recession, but lots of individual households will feel they're in their own personal recession because the amount of money per person is going down. And that, to all intents and purposes, is a recession, even if the sort of grand economic forecasters don't recognise it as such.
Yeah, exactly. Because one of the things that I always feel is underrepresented is the cost of food inflation.
Yep.
Because whenever you see the figures, it always says it's running around something like 5 or 6%. But I know just from talking to people that used to call into my show that, they're buying things that, say, for example, last year was 75p, whatever it is, and now it's 125. Or it used to be £1.50 and now it's 1.99. Big increases on small items, which people they think don't know. So I remember somebody telling me something like, he used to buy, sort of own brand pasta in a supermarket for 30p. Now it's 90.
Yes.
And
the other con,
ridiculous.
the other con, of course, Mike, is that you get shrinkflation as well. So they'll try and hold the prices the same, but you're getting less spaghetti or a smaller chocolate bar or whatever it is. And then the other key thing about, so inflation's the overall price index and whether it's going up or not. But you're quite right to say that there are certain things in our overall basket of goods that we should be worried more about than others. So, if food prices are going up a lot, but the price of a luxury yacht isn't, well, that's great for people who might be in the luxury yacht purchasing business. But for most ordinary folk, it's food and drink and those sort of basic staples that matter. Energy bills, these are the things that really matter. So, food inflation is particularly pernicious. It's higher than the rate of inflation. And look, I mean, unless there's a radical change of course by this government, things are just going to continue to get worse. So we're just being ground down a percentage point at a time, basically.
Were you surprised at the amount of money that they did raise, though, by raising the taxes from last year's budget, from November 26th? Because, the whole conversation about the OBR actually telling her that she had more fiscal headroom than she thought.
Yes.
Because there was this extra tax take.
Yes.
Because I remember at the time, many of us were saying, well, they might be putting taxes up, but people will just avoid paying.
Yeah. But if you look through
is that a good thing that they
well, if you look through the fine print, the reason that the OBR reached that conclusion was that inflation was higher than expected. Therefore, people would demand higher pay rises to keep up with inflation. And therefore, there's more people, if you're just looking at the numbers, who might be earning, 45 grand rather than 43 grand because they're trying to catch up with inflation. So it was basically inflation that improved that flow of money coming into the exchequer. So I wasn't wholly surprised about that. And the other thing is, when you start messing around with people's taxes, it takes a little while for people to change their behaviour. It's not instantaneous, right? You don't see your tax rate go up 1% and immediately say the next morning, that's it, I'm retiring.
Yes.
But it grounds you down over time. So I would sort of say, if you bring in a bad set of tax measures, let's say this year, you're probably going to feel the full force of that in 2 or 3 years' time, when people have slowly adapted their lifestyle. If you want to leave the country because you think taxes are too high, that takes quite a bit of planning. You don't just pack your bags and get on the next flight to Dubai or to Hawaii or whatever. It takes quite a bit of planning. So you get that lag effect. That's why I think things will continue to get worse, basically. And the key number to look at is this growth number. You need the growth number to be at least as fast as population growth, and it's not, basically. So we're either flatlining or getting a little bit poorer. And she no longer talks about that, does she, Rachel Reeves, laser focused on growth. And there was, according to the OBR, and according to me, a rare occasion of me agreeing with the OBR, there's nothing in her budget to encourage growth. So we are going to be flatlining at best, hoping for some good news, some fairy tale magic to happen somewhere else in the world to bring about economic growth and us catching the warm breeze. That's basically it. We now have an economic strategy based on a wing and a prayer.
Yeah. basically it's about as good as it gets, isn't it? And the wing is broken. By the way.
Exactly.
So and Starmer continues to maintain, doesn't he? Talking of prayers, that this is a Christian. When he was asked, "Is it a Christian country?" He said, "Well, I was christened." And you go, but he's also told everybody he's an atheist. So he's making out that he's sort of hedging his bets with God.
Yes, exactly right. He's definitely Pascal's wager, it's called, isn't it? You pretend to believe in God just in case he exists, and then you can say, I believe in you all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah, that seems to be pretty much straight out of the Labour Party spin book.
Indeed. I mean, one thing that was interesting this week, I thought, was this introduction of this possible new president of France. Who kind of appeared from nowhere. I don't know whether you knew about him before this week, but I didn't know much about him. Jordan Bardella, who is being tipped to become the next president of France, who, of course, is on the right-hand side of the political divide, and who's saying some quite interesting things about Channel migrants.
Yeah, so this is fascinating, and you're right. He is the favourite, I think, to be the next French president. He's from the National Rally Party, which is most associated with Marine Le Pen, but in an incredibly French example of cancellation. She's been banned from running, right? So he's effectively the number two, right? It would be a bit like if in America Trump had been banned from running, Vance would be the candidate, one would presume. So he has a fair chance of prevailing. And what he suggested is that he met Farage while he was over here, that he would be very open to accepting boats that were returned by the Brits into French waters. Well, I mean, that changes the whole dynamic of the small boats thing. And what it proves, whether he wins or whether he doesn't, if he does win, whether he's got a British government that could do business with him, there's all sorts of ifs and buts, Mike. But what it proves is, if there is the political will there to sort this, you can. Right? It is not an insurmountable problem. That's always been the case, though, hasn't it? That's always been the case. If somebody would just do something to make Britain less attractive, and I've often used the phrase, make it more of a hostile environment, and you go, sharp intake of breath, but that's all you got to do. Because why wouldn't they come? Under the circumstances now. I mean, there's a million things you've got to do, isn't there? You've definitely got to stop the pull factors, which I think are still the major thing. You're right. If it is a relatively unattractive, bad odds environment for a bogus asylum seeker to risk their life crossing the channel, they ain't going to do it, right? They are rationally calculating the odds. So if you can shift those odds such that their calculation no longer makes sense, you don't have to smash the gangs. The gangs will disperse because they just won't have a customer base.
You've just reminded me of that phrase. They don't seem to say smashing the gangs anymore, do they?
Well, I don't think they've smashed a single gang. No. I mean, the number of people they've caught is microscopic. And
it always reminds me of that scene in The Departed, when Alec Baldwin's getting up and talking about the gang that he's confronted with, led by Jack Nicholson. And he kind of says in this great Boston accent, we're out here to destroy and smash this gang, or at least marginally disrupt some of the crime that they commit. It's kind of what we're doing, marginally disrupt.
We would like to be a small irritant to the gangs if we can't actually smash them. So smashing them, I mean, obviously you want to try and round these people up and thwart their activities, but you've got to stop the pull factors. If you can't stop the pull factors, if you smash one gang, another will surely arise in its place, right? So you've got to change the odds here. You've got to make it less desirable for anybody to come over and swing the lead within our asylum system. You don't need to be barbaric about it, but neither should you be putting fighting-age men up in 4-star hotels in Canary Wharf. And you've got to make the chances of failure that much higher. I mean, at the moment, it is too easy to win your asylum case. It's too easy to appeal it. And we are not sufficiently inquisitive about it.
It's also too easy to disappear. I mean, the Daily Mail had a front page this week talking about how many have absconded, and they don't actually know the number.
I mean, there's also, hasn't the Home Office said we've lost track of tens of thousands of people who just sort of seeped into either the black market or the grey market economy. So I think while your claim is being processed, you need to be kept, not under lock and key necessarily, but we need to know where you are. You need some sort of tag on you. And we've got to make it lightning quick to process your claim. And with the default being, or if you like, the burden of proof's got to be on the person coming here. Whereas at the moment, if they come up with some fabricated sob story, the British authorities then feel they have to disprove it. Well, I actually think the burden of proof's got to be on the asylum seeker to prove it. I want to see your documentation. I want to see the evidence of this. We're going to cross-examine you about it, see if your story stacks up. And unless we are strongly persuaded, you're out on the next plane.
Yeah, absolutely right. that story's going to run and run. The other one that's kind of popped up this week, and which will obviously have ramifications going into next week, is the super flu that everybody's talking about. Hospitals are apparently becoming inundated. They say schools are being shut down. There's a few disturbing kind of dystopian COVID-like measures being brought in. And the doctors' strike, of course, which is supposed to start on the 17th for about a week. They're now saying to the doctors, you're going to kill people. You've got to stop going on strike. You can't go on strike. So, there's another problem for them.
Well, Mike, look, it wouldn't be the festive Christmas season without there being an NHS winter crisis.
No, of course not.
It's sort of part of it's part of the annual celebration. Winter crisis every goddamn year for one thing or another. And a peculiar thing to Britain as well. I can remember a few years ago talking to a German friend of mine who'd moved over here. And after a few years, he was cottoning on to, hang on, we've got another winter crisis in the British healthcare system. So I've never heard about this in Germany. So he looked through all of the German back catalogue of newspapers and news reports to try and see if there had ever been a winter crisis in the German healthcare system. And the last winter crisis they had in the German healthcare system was in, get this, 1945, where you might understand why the German healthcare system was under some degree of distress at the time. So, the NHS is always hopelessly and ill-prepared.
This is the thing, they never seem to change anything. If you were running a company like that and you had a massive crisis in autumn, October, November time, and you came back around to the next one and you hadn't done anything, people would be going, what were you doing?
Exactly. Most businesses, or a good number of businesses, have to operate to being seasonal, right? If you're selling ice creams, you're going to sell it when it's warm, not when it's raining, right? And if you're dealing with people's health problems, then winter is a worse time for colds and bugs and flu than the height of summer. But the NHS is just too unwieldy to adapt to that. And look, the resident doctors are just behaving, appallingly. Look, Wes Streeting, who actually got this right. I'll praise him. He basically said the BMA is no longer sort of an august association of the medical profession. It is acting like a cartel. So we've basically geared our healthcare system not for the needs of patients, but for the needs of doctors.
Well, it was like during COVID, they would rather you didn't actually fall ill at all. They'd rather you didn't go to hospital at all. They'd rather you didn't bother them.
Exactly.
Because, they've got a lot of other things. We're already seeing this week hospital consultants warning that surgeries have had to be cancelled because of rising cases. Well, hang on. You're in a hospital. How have you not got the ability to bring sick people in and treat other sick people? Why do you have to stop treating the other sick people? Because the other sick people are going to infect them.
Exactly.
It makes no sense, right? And then it says number of hospital beds in England occupied by infected flu patients is already higher than ever for this time of year, with no peak in sight. Well, how can they say there's no peak in sight? That's their job, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. No, the whole thing is, horrifically mismanaged. There are uncertainties, obviously. I don't think even the best epidemiologist in the world could tell you when the peak will come. But you've got to prepare for a range of eventualities. And the NHS always seems to be caught on the hop by sort of anything that was, anything new that happens that were unexpected. And I pray to God we don't have to go back to wearing these face masks. Which
I don't think people will.
I don't think
they will. I've noticed people wearing them now.
But it's just performative again now.
Again, it's the cloth mask, which has already been proven not to do any good. And in fact, if anything, probably to make it worse. I asked a friend of mine back at the time of COVID, who was in the military industry and involved in lots of things like hazmat suits and all of these sort of things for serious military engagements. And I actually said, look, tell it to me straight. These crummy, crappy, blue, papery face masks, do they do any good at all? And she replied to me, Mark, they do some good, but about the same good as wearing a tinfoil hat if you walked into a nuclear reactor. So the good it does you is so sort of, and the good it does other people is so trivial. Unless, but I probably shouldn't have said that, because the next idea is we'll all have to wear a hazmat suit before going outside, not merely a useless mask. During the midst of it all, I went to Heathrow because my daughter was coming in. And it was the Christmas just before they shut everything down again, because things had sort of opened up, and she was flying in from Dubai. And I got to the airport and I thought, this is a bit weird, you know, because we've been told we're not allowed to go anywhere. There are all these planes arriving.
Yeah.
There were planes arriving from China, you know, from Japan, from Dubai, all this kind of thing. And as I was waiting, a guy actually walked off one of the flights that had come in, which I think was the China flight, in a full hazmat suit.
Right.
He'd actually flown in one.
Right. Well, there you go. Yeah, I mean, that is belt and braces, isn't it? That really is the belt and braces side of it. But look, we've got to, and it's part of what's chipped away our culture is this, isn't it, Mike? That there are people who are in desperate need in society, and there are vulnerable people. But we are talking up the number of vulnerable people. Everyone's vulnerable in some way. And we've got to start talking up resilience and individual responsibility.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're particularly worried about getting the flu because you've got some underlying health condition or about getting COVID, well, take relevant precautions.
Yeah.
You know, fine, it might be sensible for you to stay at home or at least not mix with big crowds for a few weeks.
Right.
If you're fit and healthy and think you can risk it, risk it. I went to a football match earlier this week. You know, crowds everywhere, people coughing and spluttering everywhere. There's a chance I'm going to pick something up, isn't there? But I'm going to risk it.
Right.
We're not going to tell everybody at a football match they've got to wear a hazmat suit. I mean, completely ridiculous. Or even a face mask. So we've got to get way back to individual responsibility. The National Health Service needs a real big shake-up and has to be far more geared to something like this is basically predictable, isn't it? Okay, it looks like we've got a particularly bad bout of flu, and it looks like it's
which is not that unusual.
Not that unusual, and it looks like it's starting a bit earlier than we might expect. Again, not that unusual. It's not exactly a kind of completely implausible, utterly unpredictable event. It must be within the range of scenarios that a health service thinks it should be able to deal with. But anything that doesn't go perfectly seems to knock the health service on the floor.
Yeah.
It's pretty pathetic, really.
It is. Let me finish up with Liz Truss.
Yep.
Interesting week for her. You've advised her in the past.
Yep.
She launched her own show this week.
She has.
To rival this one.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know whether she's going to take me on for breakfast or not, but we'll see. What made her decide to do that? What's happening with her kind of approach at the moment?
Yeah. So I've spoken to her about this as well. I have seen the first episode of her show. So she thinks, and I agree with her, that she's got quite an interesting story to tell. So for all of the brickbats thrown at her and, you know, shortest lived prime minister ever, I think somebody was saying that if she lives to the age of 78, she would have spent more time at the cenotaph on Remembrance Days as an ex-prime minister than she spent as prime minister over her 49 days. Right? So she gets all of this thrown at her. And she thinks, and as I say, I agree with her, that there is a more important story to be told about what went wrong over her 7 weeks in office. And it might be that you can say maybe she did things a little bit too quickly or didn't communicate what she was doing or didn't roll the pitch, as they say now. But underlying...
They say that about everything.
They say that about everything.
When did that start being a thing?
Yeah,
rolling the bleeding pitch?
Why do you need to roll the pitch? Why don't you just come out and say what you're going to do? Why do you have to have sort of 9 preparatory speeches before doing it?
It's also that kind of BS language, isn't it? Like, let's run it up the flagpole and see if anyone salutes.
Or the other really irritating one that's crept into public sector speak now is that we are going to do something at pace.
Yes.
Right, I mean, which usually means it's going to be about the pace of a snail, usually, but nevertheless, at pace. So Liz thinks she's got this story to tell about how the structures of government, the Bank of England, the OBR, the civil service, the blob, the quangocracy, are making it impossible or nearly impossible to bring about radical change in Britain and the sort of changes that strategically I think she was correct about, that we needed to start to bring in spending constraint, we needed to deregulate and we needed to get taxes down. So her series of shows, I think goes out once a week on Fridays, is going to be to try and get that across. And I think it's valuable that she does that because she remains like an easy target figure for the Labour government, who are still trying to say that anything that's gone wrong in the country is because Liz Truss is Prime Minister for 7 weeks.
Preposterous,
pretty ludicrous. Yeah. But I think she's trying to peel away at the onion a bit and to reveal that the big problem that we've got in Britain isn't just that our present government is useless. It's even if you put in the best brainiacs ever, with the best strategy ever, and the most fantastic policies ever, they would still have a devilishly difficult job of getting anything done because the overall blob and the state and the civil service and the legal system and the Bank of England and the OBR and our 400 quangos, these independent bodies, would generally be trying to frustrate you. And if you don't sort that out, then whoever you elect and however much faith you've got in them, and it's hard to imagine we could have a government which would inspire less public faith than this lot, but Liz's concern is whoever you elect, you won't get the stuff done unless we actually change the whole way government's structured and really put politicians, however much we distrust them, back in power again, because we can get rid of politicians we don't like. It's devilishly difficult to get rid of bureaucrats we don't like or judges we don't like, and we've given way too much power to those two groups who are basically running the country on a day-to-day basis rather than our elected MPs.
Yeah, absolutely. Ever since we started doing this show last week, we've been asking you for your stories about the NHS. At the moment, we appear to be in yet another NHS crisis. We've got this super flu going around. Hospitals are complaining that they've got more patients coming in than ever. They can't cope. They're so badly overrun with sick people that they can't actually do any surgery. I've never quite understood that. If they can't do any surgery in a hospital, where are they going to do it? What is the hospital for? It's a bit like COVID, isn't it? They're telling people to start wearing masks again. They're closing schools down. But I've been asking you to give us your stories about exactly how you've been interacting with the NHS and how good or bad they've been. And I've said before, if it happens to be the truth that you've had a good experience, by all means tell me. But I don't get many of those. This is from Laurie, who says, I had a painful cough and high temperature, so I rang the doctor asking for an appointment. The reception told me there were no doctors free, but I probably had COVID. Next. You probably have COVID. Next day I called at surgery where the nurse told me it was flu. To cut a long story short, it turned out I had pneumonia in both lungs. I mean, people have said this is a problem, right? You call the receptionist at the GP surgery and they decide to sort of tell you exactly what they think is wrong with you. And they're not medically qualified. Absolutely ridiculous. Nick says this, my poor old mum had a suspected stroke at 95 and had fallen. I gave her aspirin and we called an ambulance. 23 hours of multiple excuses from the NHS emergency and no sign still. I'd long since got her into bed myself and we cancelled the ambulance. She's still here at 98. Still waiting for an ambulance, presumably. Peter says, I was told by an NHS consultant to get private health insurance ASAP as the NHS is almost dead on its feet. I told him I'd had it for years. I mean, imagine if a doctor tells you that. Don't bother coming here. We can't help you. This from Steve-O. A family member went into the Royal Stoke A&E at 12 p.m. on Monday. They are still there in a bed because there's no room on the wards. 40 ambulances at a time are queuing outside. Hospital capacity is 1,100. At least 100 of those beds are taken by people who have no right to be here. Well, that's another story altogether. Joshua says this, they can't even sterilise surgical instruments properly. Staff can't speak English. Their credentials are highly suspect. I'm avoiding anything and everything. Danny says, I've got an appointment on Monday morning at Leeds General. I won't be wearing a mask under any circumstances. Well, you remember what happened during COVID? People would turn up at hospital and if you weren't wearing a mask, they wouldn't let you in. And if you were visiting somebody who was in hospital, you had to wear a mask in order to go and visit them. A friend of mine took his wife into hospital because he wouldn't wait for an ambulance. She'd had a heart attack, right? And he was literally pushing her through the lobby of the hospital in a wheelchair. And he was stopped by some ridiculous official who said, you can't go any further unless you put a mask on. And he's like, my wife's dying. Get out of the way. And he did. Bloopy says, I didn't know there was a flu, but now I think about it, I did have a cold-like symptoms about 3 months ago. Already been and gone. I simply don't care if I was weak or vulnerable. Maybe I would go to the doctors or something. Yeah. Carl says this. There's so many of these stories. I had pneumonia and had a draining of the lung pipe fitted at around 2 in the afternoon and was instantly in agony. They had no clue why. I had about 5 x-rays through the day and night. Around 4:30 in the morning, they realised they had put the pipe in too far. Crikey. Here's one from Bob. I had a hernia. There was a 9-month wait for a telephone consultation. I'm now waiting 9 months for a test. There'll be another 12 plus months after that for an op. Anything non-urgent, expect to wait 3 years from seeing your GP till anything's sorted. Crikey. It's unbelievable. The Reverend says it's cold and flu season. Of course there are viruses going around. Have a Lemsip and get on with it. P.S. Top tip. Oregano is great at killing viruses, so fling some of that in your food and you'll avoid the nasty things. Obviously, I'm not giving you medical advice here. I don't think oregano actually does cure everything. But it does make your spaghetti bolognese taste quite nice. Steve says, my friend's son was hit by a car. Severe leg injury. ETA for an ambulance was 6 hours. Police at the scene just left him there. An old lady fell and hit her head badly, phoned for an ambulance. An hour later, a passerby takes her to A&E. NHS phoned the next day to see if we still needed an ambulance. Deary me. I mean, it's just incredible. So thank you. Listen, well, I've got so many more, but that's enough for this week. We'll keep those going, though, because we'll be talking, I think, next week to a doctor. We'll try and find out exactly why everything seems to grind to a complete halt every single winter, right? We've got doctors in this country who want to go on strike next week for a week, just before Christmas, in the middle of flu season. What on earth is going through their heads? They can't possibly be real doctors, can they? People that are supposed to care about the population? It's absolutely ridiculous. It's unbelievable and shocking. Things are going from bad to worse in this country, and there's one man who says he knows why. It's Donald Trump. That's right. The President of the United States of America has been talking this week about how Europe is basically going to hell in a handcart. He says it's because the leaders are weak, because they have absolutely no idea what's going on in their own countries, and the whole group of nations in Europe are decaying. He says they're being too politically correct, and they're failing to control immigration. Have a look at this.
Europe is in serious trouble. They've been invaded by a force of illegal aliens like nobody's ever seen before. Illegal aliens are pouring into Europe. Nobody's doing anything to change it, to get them out. It's not sustainable. And because they choose to be politically correct, they're doing just absolutely nothing about it.
Trump says Europe doesn't know what to do. He says they want to be politically correct and it makes them weak. That's what makes them weak. He's also criticised them for failing to end the war between Russia and Ukraine because, of course, once again, Volodymyr Zelensky turns up in London on Monday, along with Emmanuel Macron and Friedrich Merz from Germany, and nothing really happened. Trump said they talk, but they don't produce, and the war just keeps going on and on. I mean, 4 years now it's been going on, long before I got here. And he says Europe is a different place from the place that he used to know, and the place from which his mother came, who of course comes from Scotland. He said, if it keeps going the way it's going, Europe will not be, in my opinion, many of those countries will not be viable countries any longer. Their immigration policy is a disaster. And he also singled out London as a different place to what it used to be when he used to visit a lot during the 90s and the 80s probably. He also singled out Sadiq Khan, once again, the city's mayor, as disgusting. He called him a horrible, vicious, disgusting mayor. He says, if you take a look at London, you have a mayor named Khan. He's a horrible mayor. He's an incompetent mayor, but he's a horrible, vicious, disgusting mayor. I think he's done a terrible job. London's a different place. I love London. I hate to see it happen. It was very interesting, actually, because in Prime Minister's questions, Kemi Badenoch asked, or no, it was Ed Davey, actually, I think it was, who asked Keir Starmer whether he was going to take issue with what Donald Trump had said. And of course, Starmer, ever the complete and utter coward, wouldn't say anything against Donald Trump because he's too frightened of upsetting him. And so instead, he just said, I just think Europe's great, and I think that we will all be a lot better off if we can have closer ties with the European Union. That's the other worry, isn't it? That he wants to take us closer and back into Europe. Well, not on my watch, he's not going to do it. And I think Donald Trump's absolutely right. Britain and the rest of Europe has absolutely and utterly been ruined by the policies of all sorts of governments and by the European Union as well. Is it too late to save it? Is it too late for Nigel Farage to come in and fix it? There's possibly a new president coming in France as well, which might help, but we shall see. So do you know when some people say you're a bit older now than you think you are, or you should really know better now that you're your age? Well, I've had people say that to me all my life, and occasionally I've done things which perhaps I shouldn't have done. But the other night, I think I really excelled myself because I was out with my son, who's working in London at the moment. We'd been to a party, and we came back to the neighbourhood on the tube, as you do, got to the bus stop, and which is about a mile from my house, right? And normally there's literally a bus every 2 or 3 minutes. It's one of those things like in London, right? But we got to the sign, and the sign said the next bus was 10 minutes away. And I was like, I don't want to wait 10 minutes. I really don't. I can't. But you never see any taxis at that time of night, and I wasn't going to get an Uber. So I just thought, what are we going to do? Anyway, the bright spark that is my son, who's only 18, pointed over there and he said, oh, look, there's a scooter over there. And I went, yeah, okay then. Well, I guess I'll just wait here and I'll see you at home. He's like, no, you can get on it with me. I was like, what? I've seen people do this, right? But they're usually, teenagers. So he said, no, you just get on the back with me. And so you're about to see a piece of video footage, which is not very long, of me filming it as we go down the road near my local neighbourhood, and it didn't feel right, to be honest. First of all, I had my arms around his shoulders, and he said he'd put them around my waist. That's the way you should do it. But I could feel that I wasn't really balanced properly. And as I was filming, I thought, well, this is all right, but it wasn't comfortable. I just didn't feel right. Anyway, we went to the next part of the road, and as I tried to put my phone back into my pocket, I could feel myself sort of wobbling slightly. And then the scooter hit some kind of drain and bumped. And I was like, I'm going to go here. I'm going. And he said, I said, oh, you'll pull over. And then I suddenly thought, look, he's not going to pull over in time before I lose my balance. So I know what I'll do. I'll jump off and I'll just run to the side, like you do. Because that's easy. We're only doing about 3-4 miles an hour. But of course, I jumped off and immediately fell flat on my face. Luckily, I didn't injure myself. I didn't actually hit my head on the floor or anything like that. But I did graze my knee slightly. And I did something that I haven't done, I don't think, since I was at school. And I made a hole in the knee of my trousers. So I'll have to take it to the dry cleaners and make up a story about how somebody else wore the trousers and somehow fell over or got in a fight or something, because I can't admit to doing it myself, can I? Not at my age, for heaven's sake. Absolutely. Well, it's another fascinating week. Have you got a plank of the week nomination for us this week?
Well, I think it's going to have to be FIFA. I'm a big football fan.
Oh, yes.
And we've had the draw for the World Cup, which is in America, Mexico and Canada next year. And FIFA, it's very difficult to place them. 1 minute they're giving Donald Trump a FIFA annual peace prize, right? Which I loved watching. I just thought that's going to irritate all the right people. Right. But they had designated, in their infinite wisdom, that one of the early games in the US World Cup, I think it's in Seattle on the 26th of June, but that whoever was drawn to play this game in Seattle on the 26th of June was going to be sort of designated as the FIFA LGBTQ plus pride game.
Okay.
And I'm rubbing my hands with glee here. The two teams who've been drawn to play that match are Egypt and Iran, where homosexuality is illegal.
Yes, so, punishable by death.
Exactly, right? Exactly. So exactly, how much pride, how gay pride wouldn't really seem to be simpatico with those two particular teams. So if you're going to do some gay pride thingy around the Football World Cup, make sure that you know which teams and countries are playing that game first. So it's got to be FIFA for thinking that Egypt versus Iran is a good time to celebrate gay pride.
Tremendous. Absolutely brilliant. Great stuff. Mark, good to see you. Thank you very much. Great to see you, Mike. We'll see you soon. That was Mark Littlewood. And that was a look back on a week is alongside with politics. So that's the Mike Graham Show for another week. Fantastic week. Once again, thank you so much. We're up to 110,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. We've got loads of you on the Substack as well. Keep your eyes peeled for all sorts of roundups over the weekend. More content than ever coming next week. And don't forget, we're going to be filming Plank of the Year coming up very shortly. It's going to be live on the night of Christmas Eve. Or is it Christmas Day? Christmas Day. That's right. It's going to be live on the night of Christmas Day. We can't wait for that as well. Have a great weekend. See you next week.